Hello Year 7, this is Miss Bartley speaking, and today I'm going to deliver your history lesson. So we've just gone through our 5 questions and now we will start the rest of the lesson. Your new title for this lesson today is Should One Person Hold All the Power Over an Empire? And what that means is that today we're going to be having a look at the Roman government, we're going to have a look at a couple of Roman emperors, seeing whether they had all the power in the Roman Empire, and we're also going to see whether having too much power causes corruption or not, whether it causes problems for the rest of the empire. So our outcome today is going to be we'll be able to assess who held what power in the Roman Empire and whether this caused corruption at all. And we'll have a look at what that word corruption means in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and what I would like you to do, once I finish asking these questions, I want you to pause the video and I want you to think about some answers to the questions. So first of all, what do you think it means to be corrupt? So that's thinking about a definition to the word corruption. So if you're not entirely sure, you are free to Google the word corruption and write down the definition. Or if you want to have a go, try writing down what you think it means. And then another question I would like you to consider is what might make a corrupt leader? So that's for you to answer once you've found out what the definition to corrupt is. And then why is it a problem to have a corrupt leader? So if you want to pause the video here for just a couple of minutes and find out what the definition is to be corrupt, what you think might make a corrupt leader, and why is it a problem to have a corrupt leader as well. Okay, and if you need a couple of hints here, there's some at the bottom left hand of your screen with some ideas of what corruption could possibly be. Okay. So, corruption just means a dishonest or illegal behaviour, especially by powerful people. So if you've got that definition or found the definition for the word corruption, that's fantastic. If not, if you've not quite got it, if you want to add this definition in now for me, please. Okay, so moving on then, having a look at Rome in a little bit more detail. The Roman emperors were the most famous rulers of Rome, but in its early days, Rome was ruled by kings. Some of these kings treated their people badly, and in 509 BC, they were driven out and replaced by a ruling council called the Senate. As the Roman Empire grew, army generals threatened to take their power away from the Senate. Augustus became the first emperor of Rome, and the emperors ruled Rome from 27 BC until the end of the empire. And some of them were hard-working emperors who cared for their subjects. That's just another word for people. But others were brutal tyrants or brutal rulers who are well remembered today for their cruelty. So I want you to have a think about this map on your right here. Now this is the Roman Empire at its peak in 117 AD. So at its peak just means where it's grown the most, okay? And I want you to consider these questions at the bottom. So number 1, how powerful do you think Rome was at the height of its empire? And number 2, what problems do you see arising from a single leader being in charge of all of these countries? So if you want to pause the video here for a couple of minutes and have a think about those 2 questions for me, please. So moving on then. So what I thought we could do is have a watch at seeing how tyrannical these Roman emperors could be. So how brutal were they really? So what I would like you to do is to watch this horrible histories clip and record any evidence that provides about the evil emperors of ancient Rome. So on your piece of paper or on your Word document, that's fine. And if you are struggling to find the evil Roman emperors song, I've attached a link down here which you can just click on your own version of the PowerPoint. So once you've recorded some information down, I want you to have a think. What do you think allowed these emperors to rule in the way that they did? And what do you think was missing for these rulers to ensure that they didn't abuse their power as a ruler? So they weren't just exercising their power all the time. They had some way of they had someone to control their power. So if you want to pause the video here for about 6 or 7 minutes, that should give you plenty of time to watch the video and to answer those following questions for me, please. Okay, now that you've had a look at seeing how tyrannical these Roman emperors could be and actually thinking about their power, we're going to assess how powerful the Roman emperors truly were. So using the information on the next few slides and what we've learnt already, we're going to judge how powerful the Roman emperors were and the certain groups of people that would have helped him rule the Roman Empire too. So on your worksheet you should see a little pie chart here. Now what I would like you to do is to either indicate on your printed version of it, or you can draw it out, or you can just shade it in on your Word document, exactly how many slices the Roman emperors deserve in terms of the power that they had. So for example, one slice just means that they didn't have a lot of power, whereas if you were to shade in all 5 slices, then they would have a significant amount of power, so a lot of power. Okay? So we're starting off with the Roman emperors, and they could decide on how much to tax the people of the Roman Empire. And they had something called absolute rule, which meant that no one can question the authority or the emperor's ability to rule. So you wouldn't have people saying, oh, we don't like what you're doing, we think you've made the wrong decision. The emperors would never have anyone questioning that. They would say, well, whatever I've decided, that's the final decision. And the people of the Roman Empire would just have to accept that. They were also in charge of the Senate, which is like the Roman government. And this meant that the emperor could control whatever happened within his government, making all the decisions, for example. And the legitimacy of an emperor's rule was dependent upon his control of the Senate and how people viewed him. Another thing that the Roman emperors could do was that they were in charge of religion. So an emperor was known as the Pontifex Maximus, which in other words just means great priest, and therefore the head of the Roman religion. And then lastly, they were in charge of the army, so the military as well. And an emperor was the head of the army, and he would normally be supported by his troops, but the Roman people regarded their emperors as the equivalent of kings. So again, you've got a couple of people here who don't argue against what the Roman emperors are saying, and he's very well supported by the troops, meaning he's got quite a fair bit of power there. So what I'd like you to do on your worksheet is to shade in how much power you think the Roman emperors have got at this point. And then as we move on, we're going to have a look at the Senate and another group of people who've got some power, known as the provinces. So if you want to pause the video here for about 2 minutes, reread the information and then decide how many slices the Roman emperors should get. So now we're moving on to the Senate, which is the Roman Emperor's government. It's a little bit like our parliament that we've got in this country today. So there were around about 600 men in the Senate, and they were usually from rich noble families, and what they thought went a long way to determining Roman rule. And this was made up of leading citizens of Rome, and when they met, the Senate would discuss issues such as proposed new laws, financial issues affecting Rome, etc. So they came up with a lot of ideas and put forward some new laws that the Roman Emperor might want to agree to. But they thought about the logistics of running the country, such as how to handle money, how much should they spend on certain things or buildings, for example, like the Roman Colosseum. And the Senate had to agree to all of the emperor's laws. So they could put forward all of these laws, but ultimately the emperor gets to decide what laws are passed in the Roman Empire. So again, if you want to just pause the video here, reread the information about the Senate, and just shade in a couple of, or however many slices you think the Senate should get in terms of how much power they've got. Okay? And then lastly, we've got the provinces, which are the countries that were part of the Roman Empire. So, for example, we've got Britain, we've got France, we've got Spain, Italy, we've got Turkey, we've got other countries like part of Germany and Belgium, for example, that are part of the Roman Empire. And they were safely within the Roman Empire, and they were run by what is known as a governor. So they would be in charge of that particular country whilst the emperor was staying in Italy or in Rome. And the governor was usually a senator, so he had some form of power, and he made some form of decisions as well, being part of the Senate. So the provinces were on the empire's borders, such as Britain, and there were legions who were stationed there. Now, legions are part of the Roman army, and we'll have a look at that in a couple of lessons' time, and where wars took place, and they were always run by an army general. And these governors were representatives of the emperor, and it was their responsibility to look after the province and report back to the emperor if there were any problems. So, what I'd like you to do now is shade in how many slices you think the provinces deserve in terms of how much power they've got in the Roman Empire. So if you want to reread the information and pause the video here for a few minutes, that's fine, and then we will move on. Okay, so another task that I would like us to have a go at is thinking about these interpretations. So we're trying to investigate different historians' opinions, evidencing whether the Roman emperors were or were not corrupt enough to rule the Roman Empire. So that's going back to our outcome at the beginning of the lesson, deciding if Roman emperors were all corrupt or not. So I want you to get yourself one colour, or if you're working on pen and paper, if you just want to jot down any of the evidence that suggests that an emperor was corrupt, and I want you to also get a different colour to either highlight or to write down the information that suggests they weren't corrupt. So these are our interpretations. Now, interpretation A says that he, meaning Augustus, tempted the army with money, and his cheap food policy was successful with civilians. Indeed, he attracted everybody's goodwill by the enjoyable gift of peace. Opposition did not exist, so that means that no one really opposed his rule, and war or executions had disposed of all men of spirit. Upper class survivors found that obedience was the way to succeed. So that just means that people who were from the upper class, they would often obey what Augustus said, and that meant that war and executions didn't exist during Augustus's rule. So lots of people were willing to obey their ruler. And then we've got interpretation B by a man called Suetonius, and he's writing about an emperor ruler called Caligula. And Caligula believed himself to be a god and often said, "Remember that I have the right to do anything to anybody." Caligula flaunted his power, eliminating his political rivals, so anybody who challenged his authority and his rule, and forcing parents to watch the executions of their sons. Most egregious, however, was Caligula's declaration that he was a living god, ordering a bridge to be built between his palace and the temple of Jupiter so that he could have consultations with the deity. Now, deity just means spirit, and here it's this idea that Caligula thinks he is a god. So he wants to be close to this temple to pray and to have consultations with this spirit. So I will just give you a few moments to record any evidence that suggests these emperors were corrupt. So you could have a table with one side saying they're corrupt and another side saying that they weren't corrupt. And then once you've done that, I want you to answer the following questions. Who would have had the most support from the Senate and the provinces between Augustus and Caligula? Number 2, which interpretation suggests that a Roman emperor ruled effectively well with his power? So who ruled the best with all that power that they had? And then number 3, which interpretation suggests that a Roman emperor abused his power? And explain why you think this might have happened. So if you want to pause the video here for about 10 minutes or so, and have a go at answering those questions and completing that evidence task for me. And moving on to one of our final tasks before we move on to our fifth task. So what we're going to do, we are going to use the information that we have gathered today and trying to create a pie chart analysis. So we're trying to think about who held the most power in the Roman Empire. And what we're trying to do is rank the different people or groups within the Roman Empire. So we've got the emperor, which we've looked at, the Senate, and the province. So once you have ranked them from either 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, not 4, sorry, 1, 2 or 3, who's got the most power in total, I want you to draw a circle for a pie chart on your piece of paper or on your Word document. And then I would like you to split it into two sections, or into sections, giving the group who has the most power the largest space. And I'm going to show you what it might look like, your pie chart. And I would like you to come up with a section with each to fill in each section with an explanation. So, for example, this is what I've done. It's not necessarily right. Yours might be completely different, and that's okay. So, for example, here, I split it off into 3 sections because there are 3 groups of people that we're looking at. So, we've got the provinces. Okay, I've said that they deserve this much power, and I've said the Senate here, they have this much power, so it could be that they've got a little bit more power than the province for my reasons. And then we've got the emperor here, who I think has the most power. Okay, Now again, just to reiterate, this is only an example. It's not the finished product. Yours might be completely different, and that's okay. So I've indicated who deserves each section, and now what I'd like you to do is to write either in your pie chart or around it how or explain why this person deserves this much of a slice of the pie chart. So if you want to pause the video here for about 5 to 6 minutes and answer that for me, please. Okay, so let's have a think about our fit task for today. What I would like you to do is to write a response to who has the most power in the Roman Empire. So you should start off your sentence like, I think that the Roman Emperor or the Senate or the provinces held the most power because, so I want you to explain what they were able to do with their power, what enabled them to have the most power. And then I want you to think about what sort of power did the other groups have? So if you've chosen the emperor, for example, in your top sentence, I want you to have a think about, well, what other powers did the Senate and the provinces have? And why did your chosen group or person have more? Oops. So I want you to really think about this, therefore, part of your paragraph. So what sort of other power did the other groups have, and why did your person or group have more that you chose to begin with? So what's enabled them to have more power? And then lastly, you're explaining whether you think this might have caused one group to have been more corrupt when ruling. Okay, so if you've chosen the Roman emperor, what part of his power might have caused him to be corrupt or not? Okay, so if you want to spend about 10 minutes writing up your paragraph for me, please, I'd expect about half a page to a page to be written. Okay, and I want you to think of all those lovely examples that we've just been looking at and providing some really lovely explanations as well. Okay, and then that's the end of our lesson. So thank you very much for listening, and if you've got any problems at all, please feel free to email myself, Miss Bartley, or Mrs Hudson via your student emails. Okay, thank you very much, Year 7.